I'm Jim Peck. Welcome to MSU Today in studio. We are talking about evolution and evolution research being done here at MSU. My guests are Professor Kay Holekamp, Professor Erik Goodman, and Professor Richard Lenski, who are all part of Beacon, an international center for the study of evolution based at Michigan State University. Professor Lenski, are we still evolving?
I think we are. The whole world is evolving, including human populations. In my lab, we study bacterial evolution as it's occurring in action, and that's very much the focus of Beacon, is to use natural systems and computational systems to watch evolution as it plays out in real time.
Now, Professor Goodman, we were exchanging emails today. I don't think we were texting. We're not quite that high-tech around here. But talking about the fact that we're not talking about fossils and bones and DNA threads. This is living evolution. Is that right?
That's right. The way we say that in our title is the Center for the Study of Evolution in Action. So rather than comparing DNA from one organism with another organism, trying to figure out their common ancestors or digging up bones, we are looking at things that are happening both in the laboratory today and in the field today and the biological side. And we're also looking in the computer and looking at evolutionary processes that we can cause to go on with what we call digital organisms in the computer. We can learn about processes that happen there and look for counterparts in biology and vice versa. So they each help us understand the other and what we're seeing.
Now, when you're talking about digital evolution, how is that computer models? How does that work?
Yeah, well, imagine that you have a computer program that can make a copy of itself in the computer. We actually write code that enables it to copy itself. And when it copies itself, it sometimes makes mistakes, just as organisms' DNA sometimes have things that aren't copied perfectly. And so we call those mutations in the program. And so you get a new program, and that new program competes with the old programs. They're each trying to solve some tasks that we set for them in advance. And the ones that compete those tasks better get to grow faster, and they get to reproduce sooner, and they eventually outdistance the ones that are not as good. It's survival of the fittest, straight out of Darwin. So it's evolution going on in the computer. But in the computer, of course, we can see everything that's happening. We know exactly what's happening. We can control it. If we want to rewind the clock and say, well, was that just lucky that that happened, or would that happen again? We just turn back the clock, start the program from where we wanted to start it, or the set of programs, and see what happens the next time. So it gives us it's a wonderful microscope for studying evolutionary processes.
Now, Professor Holekamp, he mentioned survival of the fittest, and that immediately makes me think of you. Out in the field, you do a lot of work with hyenas in Africa. Is evolution something that you are seeing? Is it the result of decisions that are being made out there by these animals that you're studying?
Yeah, very much so. One of the foci of my own research with the hyenas is the evolution of societies, and that, as it turns out, is one of the main foci of the Beacon project as well. We're interested in the evolution of complex things like societies and nervous systems and entire genomes.
How do you see in a hyena society, how does, I guess I don't think of watching animals and seeing evolution at work. How would I see that?
Well, you can pose hypotheses as to why the animals, what evolutionary forces are driving the animals to make the specific decisions that they're making on a daily basis. And based on what they do in their behavior, you can actually rule out specific hypotheses. So it's a slow, painstaking process, as I think as all of our work is at some level, but nevertheless, you can actually answer those questions.
Professor Lenski, what are we learning from E. coli? You've looked at how many generations now? I was reading some statistics, 22 years?
22 years, and in the particular way we set up the experiment, we just hit 50,000 generations last week, and the experiment is ongoing. And we're looking at questions about the rates at which genomes evolve relative to the rate at which the survival of the fittest, the performance of the organisms evolves. We're also looking at questions about what controls the rate of evolution. So one of the fascinating things that we've seen in these experiments is that the rate at which new variants are produced, the actual underlying rate, as Dr. Goodman said, at which mutations are arising, that itself is evolving. And so that has sort of higher order effects where it changes the dynamic of the whole system. And so coming back to these questions about evolution of intelligence or evolution of mutation rate and what Dr. Goodman was saying, what we want to do is sort of fuse some of these ideas that come from biology and ask how they play out in the computer to solve real world problems as well as to answer basic questions of biological interest. So it's kind of a really neat fusion for us. I think that's what makes us so excited, as these colleagues who share deep interests with us and yet are studying completely different things.
And your colleagues are nodding profusely. It's obviously, Professor Holekamp, you agree with what he's saying?
Very much so, yeah, absolutely. I think this is really one of the most exciting opportunities that's been available at Michigan State since I've been on the faculty, certainly. This is really bringing together two enormously fast-moving and rich fields of study, and hopefully the fusion of the two will take us to places we never dreamed possible.
We'll be right back. We talked about Beacon. This is a huge deal. First of all, what does Beacon stand for?
It stands for the Biocomputational Evolution in Action Consortium. And we're never saying that again.
Thank goodness for acronyms.
Yes,
This is good.
really we're going to call it Beacon. It's symbolic too. We're trying to shed light on some important issues, and we call it a Center for the Study of Evolution in Action. So that's the formal title, Beacon, Center for Study of Evolution in Action.
Does just having these tools in place lead more people to get interested in it? I mean, you talked about the fact that you sort of jumped into it. There wasn't the array of things that are there. Is that in itself going to help people say, that's something I want to know about, I want to get in there?
It's going to make Michigan State very attractive as a place for bright young students from all over the country to be coming and saying, oh, I heard about this. That sounds really interesting. How do I do that? How do I get involved? So we expect to have a large number of very bright students showing up for Beacon.
Professor Lenski, is this something MSU is in alone? Are there partners to this?
We have 4 partners: North Carolina A&T University, University of Idaho, University of Washington, and help me out, University of Texas. They're going to hate me when they hear that. No, so anyhow,
they will love you that you remember.
Yeah, anyhow, yeah. So that's where being on TV makes it hard. But anyhow, so they're wonderful partners, and we chose them because they, like us, have this dual interest in this interface between biology and engineering and computer science. And so they're wonderful colleagues there, and they participated fully in the activities leading up to this. And we're going to have lots of opportunities for visitors from those institutions, students who might want to come up and work in the field with Kay, or work in the lab with Erik, and so on. So there's going to be a multi-institutional as well as multidisciplinary partnership.
Kay, it seems like in the work that I do at MSU, very little happens in a vacuum. It seems like the partnerships are very important. Why is that, and how does that help propel the work that you all are doing?
Well, I think MSU's been very unusual relative to other universities with which I've had experience in terms of actually enabling interdisciplinary research. And the administration here has been very supportive of us from the very beginning of this project, and it has been a very long process, years and years in the making of all of this. So we're very grateful that we actually have had this opportunity here at MSU, which is really quite unusual.
How do you use something like Beacon to make sure that it's a two-way exchange of information, that it's not just research that's going on here that's just sort of being sent out to the rest of the world?
Well, one of the things that we're going to be doing is involving what we call industrial affiliates. That is, many of the things that we've been talking about have applications in optimizing of things like product design or process design that can be useful to industry. Surprisingly enough, a number of evolutionary approaches have already been in use in product design and things like that for some number of years, and I've been involved in that for a long time. But what we see coming out of Beacon is enhancements to that. Right now, we're always limited by what kinds of problems we can solve using other methods, and then we use evolutionary methods, so we push it a little further. And what we hope is that Beacon will then be able to push things further yet, so that we'll be able to take on increasingly difficult industrial problems. So we see ourselves as interacting with industry, not in a, here's the way you do it, but they come to us with a problem and we work on it together to try and advance the state of the art. They can use the results, other people can use the results. We're a university that provides the things that we discover to the world.
You talk about working with industry. Is it possible that looking into actual evolution can help evolve planes, automobiles?
Trains.
Trains,
Yes, all of the above. In fact, I mentioned I've been working on evolutionary methods for engineering design for years, and more than 10 years ago, we spun off a company in order to provide the software that does this kind of evolutionary design for companies to use. They don't want to, come and visit a university for their everyday design work. They want to use commercial grade software. So that's already happened. What Beacon does is lets us take that yet another step, so that we think we'll have very good advances that will allow evolutionary methods in engineering design to advance another step.
Hey, we're talking about the digital evolution, looking at those things. If I'm a student, as I was looking through this, I was thinking, well, okay, they're talking about digital evolution, but I really want to be out in Africa with Kay Holekamp. So how is this going to connect?
I think, individual students are very much going to have their preferences and their interests, and part of what we're going to do is, for students who come to Beacon, we're going to have a course structure where computer scientists take a hands-on biology laboratory course to get a feel for what biologists study and how they study it, and at the same time biologists are going to learn a little bit about how to write programs and to take advantage of computational tools. The second semester they're going to work together in a capstone course where they're going to try to integrate their skill sets, and the faculty are going to be deeply involved in that, and different students will take different opportunities and go forward with them.
We'll be right back after this. We talked about working with different partners. Will you three be working with each other? I mean, you each kind of do different things.
Absolutely. That's one of the most exciting things about the Center for all of us, is that we can't wait to have opportunity to work with more with each other and with each other's students. I mean, that's one of the main media for interchange of ideas is when you sit down with a student and several people are advising that student and working with that student on a regular basis, and the student puts out things and everybody gets a chance to chip in their 2 cents worth, and a lot of that is how academia works. And when you have people from very different backgrounds academically talking and working with the same students, it's a very rich environment. A lot of good stuff happens.
A lot of 2 cents adds up to many dollars.
That's right. That's right.
I can see that around here. And is the 2 cents about hyenas and their evolution going to make a car better? I mean, do you see those as naturally connected?
Actually, I think, I don't know about the car per se, but I definitely believe that watching hyenas, for example, can teach us about making more efficient robots, for example, more complex and workable neural networks that can endow machines with capabilities that they certainly don't have today. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for exchange going in that direction, and likewise we can actually have our colleagues help us do experiments in computers that would never be able to occur in my lifetime, because generation time in hyenas is very slow.
To give one sort of concrete example of that, is one of the areas that Kay works on is the evolution of intelligence. And artificial intelligence has been a topic that has interested people for many, many years. And there's been this sort of sense that if only we understood all the wiring of the human brain, we could build a copy of it. But the way I think collectively the way we look at it is that brains evolved from simpler structures, simpler brains, simpler neural networks, and so on. And so what if we try to, instead of create artificial intelligence, create environments in which intelligence is rewarded, computational environments? And so the ideas from biology, like what Kay learns by studying organisms and the decisions they make in nature, sets up hypotheses. She's going to struggle to test those in natural systems. Others of us are going to struggle to say, okay, can we distinguish between those? Do they give us some idea of how to manipulate a robotic or an engineered system to give it the potential to evolve in interesting directions? And so it's this sort of virtuous feedback that I think that all of us are going to get lots of ideas that are going to inform our work.
Now, isn't this in the movies how we end up with robots taking over our world? Isn't that eventually the end of the story?
Then we unplug them.
Then you unplug them. Okay, they never show you that part of the movie.
Don't give them the plug.
Don't give them the plug, and don't give them rechargeable batteries. How do you, working in different areas, coming up, I mean, you work on research in your own chunks there. How do you break down those silos so that this information does get shared?
Well, the training that Rich was talking about that students will get coming into Beacon is one thing. In other words, if we get students a year from now that have been through a chance to work with each other and had disciplinary courses, in the cross-discipline from what they came in with, and then teamwork together, those barriers are getting awfully low. Okay, and the faculty here and at the other Beacon sites are already working with each other, collaborating with each other, and again, the barriers in these particular places are relatively low. So we're past a lot of that. The exciting thing is that for the next generation of students, those barriers won't be there at all, and they'll be able to move directly forward in their research with the benefits of both kinds of insight available to them.
And we'll be right back after this. This presentation has been brought to you by Michigan State University, America's premier land-grant institution. 150 years of advancing knowledge, transforming lives. Do you think that people understand when you say evolution what that really means?
That's a great question, and I think people with words like evolution and design have a lot of different individuals have different senses of what those mean. Evolutionary biologists often talk about design, and they mean that in the context of how nature has optimized some feature of an organism so that it flies better, or swims better, fights better, and so on. And so we might call that design, whereas to other people, oh, that implies somebody or something, some process that is outside of nature. But I think here we see sort of that certainly for technological ends, we can have the best of both worlds. Where an engineer says, hey, we know this is a constraint, we have to build that into our models, we can start with that and then do evolutionary approaches within that framework. So in some sense, we're breaking down that barrier, although not necessarily people's misconceptions about that, although hopefully by students seeing these processes in the laboratory as well as the sorts of public outreaches and so on, we hope that people will see, hey, evolution is interesting and useful.
Kay, you're nodding a lot.
Yeah, I think actually the average American probably recognizes the importance of evolution when they think about antibiotic resistance and how that has become a serious health issue in hospitals in this country and elsewhere. But I think what most people don't currently recognize, that those of us participating in Beacon see, I think, quite clearly, is that you can do things like Erik Goodman here has done, where an automobile company came to him and said, we need a chassis design that will not allow people's legs to be hurt, crushed in a head-on collision. And he actually used evolutionary algorithms in the computer to actually evolve a chassis that protected people's legs and more effectively than any human had been able previously to design it de novo. So I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for industry to take advantage of evolutionary biology and for people to appreciate it for the first time.
So Erik, in talking about things like the chassis, if you're looking, why use evolution and not just skip ahead and say, oh, well, this is what we need to do?
Well, many times we can specify what it is that we want the performance or the behavior to be, but we don't know how to build something that has that performance. And so we provide conditions or constraints that say, well, it can't be bigger than this, it can't be heavier than this, it should have this kind of general configuration, it needs to hook up to this, it needs to hook up to that. But then we turn that over to an evolutionary algorithm and let it explore the space of all the different possible shapes, for example, that you could make that component, or materials you could make it out of, or little wrinkles and dents and bumps that you could put into it, that a human designer many times would never come up with. And what comes out of the evolutionary process is something that behaves spectacularly well. And when a designer first looks at it, he might say, that doesn't look like the widget that I design. And then they take a look at it again, and then they look at the performance, they say, ooh, and then they look at it and they say, oh, I see, so this is, oh yeah, and this is doing this, and this, oh yeah, so, oh, that, and all of a sudden they, oh, yeah, I see how that could work, but I sure never would have designed that. Well, that's the kind of stuff that comes out of evolutionary processes. You can get real novelty out of these processes because you just say what it has to do. You don't say how it has to do it.
Transformational for MSU, transformational for the research. How does each of you rate this?
MSU has said, our president, our provost, this is an area where MSU is going to be world class. All right, they've recognized that we've got the underpinnings of that now, and they're going to invest in that. And the investment that they made in helping to get Beacon and make that a reality is a very significant part of that. So this is an area where, yeah, MSU is going to be impacted. We're going to be hiring new faculty in this area. We're going to be attracting some of the world's best students to work in this area. So it will have an impact on MSU. And in turn, to whatever extent we can help train people that go other places in the world and help produce software and methods that improve design for American industry and the world industry, and to which we can have an impact on the way evolution is looked at, not as something you study out of a textbook, but as something that you observe happening in front of you. That's transformative.
Very much so. I think this is going to be transformative in the sense that it actually teaches us absolutely unexpected and wonderful, rich things about the biological world, but also about how we can actually use evolutionary processes to improve our own lives.
I think incredibly transformational for research. We talked about how some people don't have misunderstandings about evolution. Another group of people might say, well, don't we know evolution is real? And we do. But by looking at evolution in action and looking really at details in well-chosen systems where it's normally very hard to see those details, it gets you thinking about, you know, for example, in a technological circumstance, well, should we just turn the dial up and really increase the mutation rate? Because we want variation if we're going to evolve things. Well, what's an optimal mutation rate to set for an experiment of the sort that Erik was talking about, for example? So by looking at things in action and this feedback between faster and slower evolving systems, the biological systems and the computer science and engineering systems, I think it's going to be transformational for research.
Okay, well, all of you, I thank you for being here. We're just about out of time. I'd like to thank my guests and to you for watching MSU Today in studio. For more information, head to our website. I'm Jim Peck. I'll see you next time right here on MSU Today in studio.